Let's talk about this even further with Florida politics reporter A.G. Gankarski, friend of the program. He joins us now. A.G., thanks so much for being with us on this Friday night. So you heard from Craig Patrick there that I guess the conventional wisdom might be this helps DeSantis with the primary electorate, but not so much with the general electorate. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do agree with that, with the caveat. Obviously, in a Republican primary, you have to run to the right as much as possible. Moderates do not win the Republican primaries. But the caveat is this: when I look at statewide polling and I look at state polling from all over the country covering DeSantis, his strength is with so-called moderate Republicans. They're the ones that have been driving his margins. And over the last couple of months, he's been finding attrition with that group as session's gone on and this abortion ban has moved forward and other bills that have been, placating to the hard right evangelical part of the party. So, the DeSantis is kind of in a double bind here because the things he's doing would seem to be good for a primary performance. But if you break down the numbers a little bit in terms of moderate Republicans, in terms of Republicans who make more money, better education, the people where he's seen strength against Trump, those voters do not necessarily want this kind of ban. So the jury is out on who's actually going to play in the primary. Okay, so let's talk about, though, you mentioned some of the polling that's out there. And I think the average of some of these polls, Trump is up, in the double digits, almost 20 points above DeSantis amongst GOP primary voters. Is this doing anything to the potential announcement by DeSantis? How are they, I guess, responding to this? I mean, we're not that far away from, some of these primary contests next year. Things are coalescing, and Donald Trump, post-arraignment, post-indictment, seems to have a lock on the nomination. Is that factoring in with Ron DeSantis's decision, do you think? Well, I think he's so far into this at this point that if he backs down, that closes the window for good. Republicans typically don't have a long window to be president, or a wide window. Ronald Reagan got 2 bites at the apple. Donald Trump's obviously getting a 3rd bite of the apple. But, Ron DeSantis is more of a Marco Rubio type, whereas if it doesn't happen for him in 2024, it's probably not going to happen. 4 years later, he's got more time in the governor's office. Things aren't going great in Florida in terms of affordability, homeowners insurance, things like that. So, this is kind of a strike while the iron's hot moment. But, the paradox is the iron may not be so hot right now because Donald Trump, as you pointed out, is dominating in polls. Yeah. And, it's really happened over the last couple of weeks, especially since the indictment and the arrest, where voters have really come to him in what could be called a tribal moment. Yeah. But Ron DeSantis is a counter to that. That's kind of the problem he's facing right now. Yeah, one of the main attack lines from former President Trump, he accuses DeSantis of, while a member back in Congress, back in the day, of wanting to cut Social Security, wanting to cut Medicare. And that has been, like I said, a huge attack line by Trump against DeSantis. Can DeSantis respond to that effectively, do you think? Does he still want to cut Medicare and Social Security? He said during a Fox News interview a few weeks ago that he did not want to cut them anymore. But that didn't really solve the problem because Trump is still hitting him, saying he took that position in the first place. That's his real position. That may or may not be true. But, for DeSantis to try to recalibrate his position, much like he did on Ukraine recently, it gives him the impression of being a flip-flopper. And the DeSantis appeal is in being definite, being stalwart, that rock-ribbed conservative. But, if you keep trying to explain what you're saying, the old saying is, if you're explaining, you're losing. And since Ron DeSantis had to explain and recontextualize his positions, he suffered poll deficits. Yeah. So, he's kind of in a box here because the positions he took in 2013 in Congress are not the positions that really fly going to 2024. Yeah. I want to talk about, we saw today, just today, someone who we thought was going to announce the presidential bid opted out. Mike Pompeo saying not going to do it. So is that even on the table? Is that even operative for
DeSantis and his team that he has already, gathered to help him mount this bid once he officially announces. Is that timetable all on track? Are we going to get an announcement in May?
Well, he's got the fundraising to do it. He's got a political team that is, functioning for him. He's got a super PAC that's supporting him. He's visiting all the early states as much as he can and still be governor of the state of Florida. So, all systems appear to be go. Whether it's May or June or July, that's an open question. There's still a little problem with the resign to run law in Florida. That hasn't been fully resolved. And there's some question as to whether he can actually run for president without a law change, but there hasn't been any movement in the legislature to change that. So it seems like they're betting on a friendly Florida Supreme Court to basically greenlight this. But it feels like DeSantis has to move by summer. Session ends here in a few weeks. So once session ends, there's not much for him to do in the state besides go around and maybe do some bill signings and all of that. But by July 1st, that's the end of the legislative year. All the bills have to be signed. And then the question is, are you going to run or not?
Right.
And if he doesn't run, it's not going to happen for him, I don't think.
Yeah, let's talk about the bill signing just really quickly. Just yesterday, late last night, AG, I didn't see any men in that photo flanked by female supporters. He did this kind of in the dead of night. Obviously, he said he was going to sign it all along. It passed the Florida House just yesterday. Does he not want to talk about this? If so, why not?
Well, he hasn't talked about it in his speeches in Ohio yesterday or New Hampshire today. I found that to be telling because, if you're the 6-week abortion ban guy, you would theoretically want to talk about it.
Right.
In fact, he came back in between political trips. He signed it late last night, and it was sort of a secret ceremony. And he had a little please clap kind of moment, sort of like Jeb Bush, where he's signing the bills and saying, okay, you can cheer now. And of course, everybody cheered, but it kind of gave the impression of this being a really staged event. So, he's trying to capitalize on it politically, but he doesn't seem to have the courage of the messaging on it. And that's something that separates him from other politicians because during the House debate, there were people saying we wanted more of a ban than this. We wanted a full ban. And of course, people tell you a 6-week ban is essentially a full ban,
right?
Because a woman doesn't know she's pregnant by 6 weeks in many cases.
Yeah.
And even she does, it's hard to get a doctor's appointment. But, people in the House were framing as a compromise, but DeSantis doesn't seem willing to lean into this. And that's kind of telling as to his attempts at triangulation with these Republican voters and with the voters writ large.
Yeah. So, like you said, he was in New Hampshire today, and some people are not too happy with him signing this law restricting abortion there in the state to 6 weeks. You posted this video from his speech today. Protesters stormed the stage. Let's just watch that.
14, 16, 18. Yeah, thank you.
Jews against DeSantis! Jews against DeSantis! Jews against DeSantis!
You gotta have a little spice in the speech, right? I mean, you gotta have a little fun.
Okay, so they were chanting Jews against DeSantis. I thought that was interesting. How does he respond to criticism like this? Some have said he's a little stodgy, a little stolid there on the stump, not as charismatic as some donors would like. Is that a liability? Has it been a liability? Will it be going forward?
Yeah, it looked like a liability tonight for sure. He went right back to the stump speech he's given so many times that I could recite it myself. And he tried to ad lib, but he clearly looked shaken on the stage. DeSantis supporters will tell you that he didn't look shaken, but if you look at that, he definitely had an expression of consternation. And, this is the thing. He's gotten protesters before. When he went to Long Island for his book tour, there were Trump supporters there who were catcalling him and jeering him from the crowd. And he didn't deal well with that either. Donald Trump, of course, was the king of dealing with protesters. He would tell them, go home to Bernie Sanders. But Ron DeSantis doesn't have that connection with the crowd. He doesn't even have that confidence. He stays on script. And I don't know if he can course correct in time because with Donald Trump commanding half the support in the party and DeSantis being painted as an apostate and a traitor to Trump, there's going to be more of this.
Yeah.
Not to mention things like tonight, which was, probably a one-off.
Right.
I don't know what that was about. That was as surprising to me as anything. But Trumpers are definitely weighing in on this, and they aren't liking what they see from DeSantis.
Yeah. AG, just lastly, and obviously you live in the state, you report in the state so much. I want to put up this tweet here because a lot of bad weather in Florida this week, so much so that Fort Lauderdale Airport inundated, excuse me, with floodwaters. Is this impacting his ability to lead the state?
It's a bad look. I mean, you've got staffers who are doing the heavy lifting on the ground, and that would be the case regardless. But if he weren't making political trips yesterday and today, he would have been down there with a helicopter or something, looking over flood damage, walking around with his rain boots and whatever else, and looking like he's responding to the emergency. This was not a good look for him. Donald Trump Jr. pointed out as much on Twitter. And, this is something, again, where DeSantis apologists are saying it's not a big deal. But for people in Fort Lauderdale, it's definitely a big deal. And it's something that makes him look like he doesn't have his eye on the ball. Is it a Katrina moment like George W. Bush had in 2005? I wouldn't go that far.
Okay.
But when you've got 2 feet of rain in the state, in a major city in the state, and the governor's MIA, that's a big deal.
Yeah. I mean, do Floridians, are they saying that too? Are they asking, where was Ron DeSantis during all of this rain, all of this weather? And then they see he was on the campaign trail, essentially. What do they say to that?
They are basically saying that, like,
okay,
why is the governor on campaign trail when Fort Lauderdale is underwater?
Okay.
I mean, I've heard that 100 times today if I heard it once.
Wow. All right, A.G. Gankarski, as always, we appreciate your insight. We're going to be speaking a lot, I think, in the next few months, and we'll talk again. Thanks so much, A.G.
Thanks. Have a great weekend.